I'm John Travis. Today in Sydney, Australia, locked into a hotel for 14 days, which is required of any citizens returning to the country. That we're the only people who get in. And I have the pleasure of talking to Pam McDonald in Walnut Creek, California. It's the 15th of November here, the 14th of November there in 2020. And we're going to find out who you are and why, Pam, beginning with your birth, your childhood, your parents, the factors that shaped your career in integrative medicine.
Mm-hmm. So I was born in Paisley, Scotland, 8 o'clock, November 19th, 1959. And around that time, my grandfather was actually diagnosed with heart disease. But at the same time, my dad was in the Royal Navy and my mom had me. And then after 2 hours, decided to leave. And so my grandparents were faced with the decision to, what do we do with this 13-month-old, which was my sister, and this brand new baby? And because my grandfather had been diagnosed with heart disease, he said, okay, he was an architect and was told not to sit behind a desk anymore. He had to get a job that would be more active. And so he said, all right, let's change our lives. We'll take the children and we'll move to the south of England. We'll build a house and we'll live happily. And that's exactly what happened. Until my grandfather was 64 years old and he had a heart attack and died. But that heart attack kind of, it influenced me. And I didn't really know about that heart disease, heart attack experience until I opened my own practice and became obsessed with getting everything right, with having everything organized and having all the research. And then my husband, who's usually right, says, you're a little bit crazy. You're doing an integrative medicine fellowship. You're working all hours, sometimes till 3 a.m. You go see somebody, see what's behind this. And I just finished a resident week at the University of Arizona, came back, and I felt like it was too much for myself and took his advice and went and saw a therapist. And the first thing she said, well, come on, let's go exploring. Let's do a guided imagery. And I'd just done all the work on guided imagery and understood what it was and how it could help a patient. I said, okay, I'm game. And as soon as I did the guided imagery, what came up was the experience of my grandfather dying. And I found myself almost floating in the house, witnessing what had happened. And what was happening at the time is my dad, who found himself a single dad with his parents taking care of the kids, finding a partner. But my dad was 32 years old and she was 18. And my grandparents had committed to bringing us up. And an 18-year-old back in 67, 68 years, and in England, that just didn't sit well with my grandparents. But he was gonna marry her and did, and we moved around the corner. The next scene in my guided imagery was everything went into slow motion and the phone was ringing. And my dad picked up the phone and it was almost like I could hear every single word. My grandmother was saying, your dad's had a heart attack, come over. And it was literally around the corner. And I could see myself pulling on my dad's jacket saying, help granddad, help granddad. And he was pushing me away. And he was telling my grandmother, no, it's just his heart. It's not his heart, it's his stomach. So, in medicine, we have this, is it the stomach or is it the heart? Is he having reflux? Is he having a heart issue? And I decided to not stay for the phone call. And I saw myself running around to the house. And when I got there, the ambulance was there and he had died. So fast forward to when I was working in primary care medicine and my husband was seeing my colleague for a physical. Now, my husband had had a heart disease issue, had no heart disease issue, but his dad had died of heart disease. And he was nervous about, would I ever get heart disease? So he asked his doctor, let's do all the blood tests. What can we do to make sure I don't have heart disease? And he said, there's really no good test. We can do a treadmill test, but there's a heart scan place that just opened in Walnut Creek. Go get a heart scan.
Coronary calcium?
Yeah, coronary calcium score. So we went, and I actually went too. I went first because he was a little nervous. Mine came up completely clean, and his came up with white spots all over the place. You could definitely see that he had coronary calcium, but he had a completely normal screening lipid panel. And I'm like, whoa. He was silent, went back to the house, disappeared. I found him in the bedroom crying. And he said to me, am I going to die? And that brought up a whole bunch of feeling in me, or a whole bunch of like determination. I'm going to find an answer to this. And then, of course, the next 3 weeks, I discovered Goffman's work, Saperco's work, all of the advanced lipid testing, all the genetic testing. And then I couldn't do primary care the way I normally did it. I had to go in and do this other kind of evaluation, and it took a lot of work. And so I set up a practice out of that experience. And it has been going for almost 18 years now. And I've got literally hundreds of thousands of people better. And an integrative medicine approach is a heck of a lot better versus a medication approach. Amen. In my experience, right? So I think my experience as a child was right on target. I think that whole experience with my grandfather was really important for me to experience. It was definitely a negative thing on the front end, but on the back end for me, it was something that pushed me into the desire of wanting to become interested in heart disease prevention. And the number one killer of both men and women in our culture. And of course, it's gotten worse. Right?
Yeah. Well, let's go back more to your childhood. So you're living with your grandparents, and now, did your father move to the south of England too, or did he come in later?
He did. He moved to the south of England also. So he was living in this little house that my grandfather built for us until I was 8 years old.
Mm-hmm. And that's when he met the 18-year-old, or?
Yes, yes. Okay. And they're actually still married today. They've been married for a long time. So It definitely worked.
Great. So what are your earliest memories? Were you playing nurse as a little girl? How were things with your sister?
No, I never kind of had this. The only time I had a desire to become a nurse was in England at 14 years old. You have to really declare yourself on what you want to become, because that tells you which examinations you take and what your path will be. And at 14, we got asked, what do you want to be? And I was asked that question and really didn't know what I wanted to be. And then somebody said, well, ever thought of becoming a nurse? And then it was like the whole world opened up. And yes, that is exactly what I want to be. It was a very quick question asked, but it's almost like nobody put the light on that before, and then they shone the light on it, and then boom, it was instantly a yes for me.
And how was it having an older sister? Was she supportive? Were you she's 3 years older?
My sister was great. She did all the naughty things, and I watched. So if she did it and got in trouble, then I didn't do it. I was very, very observant. And it's almost like I felt like she was there to protect me. Um, she was only 13 months older than me, but I can tell you, I did not get in any trouble. She got in all the trouble. And she was a great sister. And she still lives in England. Um, she came to Canada at one point, but didn't end up living in
Mhm.
Canada. But she was
And
definitely a good sister.
how
Yeah.
was school for you? Grade school or what? It's not grade school in England. What's it called? Primary or?
Yeah, primary school, secondary school. So interesting enough, I really wasn't interested in school. Um, I would wait to go out to play. I was the person who wanted to go out and play and run and be in the woods and go outside and be in nature. I actually didn't learn to read until I was 9 years old. I just wasn't interested in it. For me to take a book and read the words on a page, forget it. I didn't want it. Um, and then they got me a tutor and said, you have to learn how to read. And I think it was around just after my grandfather had died, they got the tutor and said, you got to do this. And so I kind of learned, but still wasn't really interested in reading. I was more interested in experiencing something, more of if I could see it and touch it, it was real to me. If I had to read about it, I didn't really want to do that. And I guess maybe nursing was a good thing for me to go into, because everything is you've got to do something, right? Yes, you have to learn about nursing theory, but after you've learned about that and you've done the books, then you're into the practical side of how to take care of somebody, especially if you're doing bedside nursing. Of course, that changed as I got older. But that's pretty much what had happened. It was a great profession for me, or it still is a great profession for me.
And moving through school then, after you probably got more familiar with reading to get to the upper levels, were there any subjects that interested you or?
So I had an experience in school one day. Now, because I had this reading issue, I guess I was kind of dubbed a little bit special, because I had a tutor. And I was in not primary school, but I had gone into secondary school. So I was walking up the stairs, and the stairs in my school, which was a very old school, were very wide and very long. I don't know if you've seen Harry Potter and you see the big stairs that they walk up. That's what the stairs were like. And I remember one day I was walking up these stairs, and there was a balcony above me, and two of my teachers were talking about me up there. And I stopped on the stairs, and pretty much what they said was, yeah, well, she's probably not going to do too well in her exams, but I think we may be surprised to see what Pam McDonald can do. And I heard this. So we had an ability to say exactly what subjects we wanted to do. And 4 or 5 subjects was about right for the individual person. But I was interested in a lot of things. And so I ended up doing 9 subjects and passed every single one of them. And it was because I had overheard this conversation that I would never do that well. Well, hello.
I'll show them.
Don't ever tell me that, or don't let me hear that, because I ended up taking, physics and chemistry and biology and geography and English and math, and I did them all and passed them all. So I actually discovered that when I set my mind to do something like that, which was a difficult thing to do, I could accomplish it.
Hmm. It'd be interesting to find out if they did that deliberately with other students too, as a motivation tool.
No, when I heard it, and I kind of heard my name, and I stopped on the stairs, and I'm like, I'm just going to keep walking. And when I walked up the other side of the stairs, oh, there she is. And they walked away. So I think I don't think it was on purpose.
That'd be an interesting technique if it really works that
It
well.
would be an interesting technique, yes, for sure.
Educational tools.
Yeah.
So then you finished, is it called high school in England?
It's called secondary school.
Just secondary school.
Yes.
And also, what town were you in or near?
So I was in a town called St. Austell, Cornwall,
Mm-hmm.
and they had like an infant school, a primary school, and a secondary school, and a college, a small college. So after a secondary school, and I had done my exams, I went to a college setting and did pre-nursing course. And then I was accepted to the Royal Hospital of St. Bartholomew's in London, which turns 900 years old in 2023, and
Wow.
to nursing school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, college is different in England than here, though, isn't it? At least in Australia, it is.
Yeah, it is. Definitely.
How would you define college?
So it was almost like a stepping stone between secondary school, primary school, and university. So it's almost like the last part of high school in the United States, but you do more specific things.
Mm-hmm.
And my course was a pre-nursing course.
And in secondary school, does that go through a 12th grade, or do they call them forms in England too, like here?
Just years, classes and years. So.
And what year would you leave secondary school? 12?
16 years old.
Yeah, but I mean numbers of their years, like, is it 1 through 10, 1 through 11, 12?
So I believe we go into secondary school at 13, 14 years old. And then you stay there for 2-3 years, and then you go into the college.
Okay, so that would be like junior and senior year of high school, probably.
Right.
So then, how did you wind up in St. Bart's, as I've heard you call it?
So Plymouth is a city just out of Cornwall, and it has a big nursing school. And I went there and checked it out, and that was like the closest thing to home. And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't feel like it was a place that I should be. And then my mom said, you could go to one of the best schools in London. You could try and apply to one of the best schools in London, which is the Royal Hospital of St. Bartholomew's, and see if you could get in there. And they had a William Harvey Institute. They had St. Bartholomew's is where the circulation of the blood was discovered and founded by William Harvey. And so I did a little research in the library about what is that? What's that institute all about? What is it famous for? So Elizabeth Blackwell, which was the first woman doctor, trained at Bart's. I thought, the first woman doctor, that sounds like a good place to go. And then the whole heart circulation of the blood interested me. And the fact that it had a really, really good nursing school, and it was in London, in the center of London, very close to St. Paul's Cathedral. That whole set of information was appealing to me. So I applied. And because I didn't want to go to Bristol or Plymouth, I was banking on hoping to get Bart's, and did, and I got it. So I was very, very, very happy. And when I arrived, I remember the weekend I arrived, it's almost like my life shifted. I remember saying goodbye to my parents and my sisters, like, okay, it's beginning. I felt almost a physical shift in who I was when I went there.
Mm-hmm. Now you said sisters. Was there another sister?
Yeah, I had a younger sister, Heather, and I had another younger sister, Ailsa, and a brother also.
So these are from your father's then 18-year-old?
Second marriage, yeah.
Second marriage, yeah. Oh, okay. And how much younger are they than you?
I believe Alexis, the brother, is 14 years younger, and Ailsa is 16 years younger.
So you weren't really growing up together then, but
No, not really.
yeah.
They were born. I was at home when they were born, both of them, but I left.
Yeah,
Afterward.
Similar with my kid sister. So what was life in London? This would have been what, early 70s?
Late 70s, so 1978. 77, I was granted, and then I started 78.
So a small town girl hits the big city. What was that like?
Exactly. Now, it wasn't too bad because we had the nursing home, and I was one of the lucky ones who got my own room, and it was a massive room, and I could see St. Paul's Cathedral from my windows. I had 3 windows. The bathroom was right next door to me. The kitchen was right across the hall. I actually thought about this recently, on how I really had a great experience at St. Bartholomew's. Maids changed your bedding twice a week. Your laundry was delivered to your door.
Wow.
So it was, and you got paid. You got paid to go to nursing school.
Wow.
Right. The government paid you X amount of pounds to go to nursing school, and you had to buy your own food, but there was a cafeteria. And it was, I believe it was part of a job work program that the government had launched. One, because I believe there was a shortage of nurses in London, and they had made an agreement with an area that was more poor, where the nurses of the Royal Hospital St. Bartholomew's would support part of those areas in their training and in their education. So we'd have experience in the areas of like the nursing homes and that kind of thing, the clinics, and then that would bring in more support for the nurses that were already there.
And what was the schooling like? Did you have like gross anatomy lab? I don't know the nurse training program before you're out with patients.
We had what we call blocks. So you would be in a block and you would learn certain techniques and skills in the blocks, and then you would go and you would work on the wards with the nurses who were already trained, and the sisters, and some people called pinks who were kind of sisters in training. It was pretty controlled, but we did night shifts and we did day shifts, and we did, time in this, what we call blocks, where you get the theory of whatever you're learning in the next ward. So it's very interesting.
So that was 3 years?
Yes.
And then what?
Then I actually only stayed for a very short period of time, and then I got married and came to the United States.
Oh. And how did you happen to get married?
I actually met my husband in in London. He was working as an international tax lawyer, and for a big 8 CPA company, and he was doing international tax law. And we met, and we had this long distance relationship pretty much for most of my training. And then we decided, you know, does he stay in London or does he move back to San Francisco? And I moved back to San Francisco with him. And I moved back because of the weather. San Francisco weather was much better than London weather.
Yeah.
Much less rain. So that's really one of the things that I really liked California, and I really liked the weather.
So you'd come, you've been visiting and knew what it was before you moved?
I did. I visited several times before I moved. Yeah.
Now, where did you actually meet? At a bar or a tax conference or on the board?
No. Actually, we met at a nightclub.
No.
Hang
on a second. I'm getting a knock at the door and it's not my lunch. So I'm going to pause the recording. And okay, we're resuming. I had to go to the door here at the hotel room and have my COVID test done. And we're back with Pam, just finding out where you met Rick and how.
So I actually was married before I married Rick. So my husband, who I originally met in London, I divorced in 1984. And so I met Rick in 1985, and we married in 1993. So
took you a while to tie the knot.
Yeah, you know, divorce is not ever easy. So he'd actually been divorced and I had been divorced. So we decided to kind of live together to see if we could.
Been there, done that. Yeah.
Yep. So, and then, you know, it was.
Well, you came to California in what, 80?
81.
81, okay.
The end of 81. Yeah.
So what, you've now got a nursing degree, but what does that mean in terms of practicing in the States? Did you have to do more training, or was it?
I did. I had to do some more training at UCSF in San Francisco, and then I got my license as an RN, and then I got a nurse practitioner license. Then did another one, and then started to work in primary care. And they started to put pediatrics on my schedule. I said, no, I can't see peds. You guys can't do that. And they said, well, then you need to see peds, go back and get your pediatric training. So I went back and got that and stayed.
Is that all UCSF also?
No, UCLA. I did a pediatric, and then they gave me a family nurse practitioner, and I did a surgery program at UCLA also, because I was very much interested in surgery back at the beginning when I became a nurse practitioner first. And I did surgery. So I would see patients in the clinic, and then I would go across the hall, and we have actually behind my office, there's actually 3 surgery suites. So I worked there also.
And so you moved to LA, or did you commute, or how did that work?
Actually, to do the program, I actually did commute, but then came back to the Bay Area and worked in primary care. I never actually gave up the primary care practice in Blackhawk. I just did it. Rick would fly me down, and I would go and I would do what I need to do, and then come back on the weekend and work.
Oh, that's right. He has a plane, so he could fly you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, somewhere along the line, you had some kids yourself, right? Is that
exactly? Yeah, I did. I have 3 children. Victoria was both my first marriage, and then we had Allison and Paige with Rick.
Hmm. So, what are they? They're grown, I gather, and
So Victoria is the oldest, and she lives in Tennessee, and she has 2 children, and works for Salesforce. And Allison lives in San Francisco and works for a startup technology company. And Paige is in college still.
mm. Now she
She's
had a terrible accident a few years ago, and she recovered from that.
Victoria had an accident when she was 21. She had a head-on collision. And
Oh,
then 12 years after that, which was 3 years ago, she had another head-on collision
that
and
was
broke
Victoria.
her
I
neck.
thought for some reason I thought it was Paige. Huh.
No, it was Victoria.
Mm.
Yes. When Victoria's 21, and then she had it again when she was 33. But,
Oh,
yeah,
so much for my memory.
right.
So now let's go through the steps that led to your opening your current practice and the transformation and your connection with Andy Weil and integrative and all the juicy wellness kind of stuff that
Right.
led you to me and this interview.
Yeah. So I guess, let's see, I had already opened my practice in 2003, in June of 2003, which, by the way, interesting enough, happened to be the actual date. And this was not conscious. My grandfather died June 27th at 8 a.m. And I opened the practice June 27th at 8 a.m. And the psychologist I was seeing, she said, you need to find some more information about this. And so she said, pull the death certificate. And that's where all the dates and times,
Mhm.
I had to call my sister in England and say, get me the death certificate. And so she did and scanned it and sent it to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, Penscott Lane, June 27th at 8 a.m. And I'm like, bingo, right there and there. So that gave me some really very interesting information about what the mind can do, what it
Yeah.
can push you to do, right? So I had opened the practice, and I got an invitation from a cardiologist to go to an integrative medicine cardiology conference in Hawaii. And Dr. Saperko was going to be speaking, who was the guy who was involved in the advanced lipid testing. And so I went really to just meet some new people and hear a little bit more about integrative medicine and integrative cardiology. And I ended up sitting next to Dean Ornish. I walked into this massive room. There's probably, I don't know, 500, 600 chairs in the room. There was an IT person in the front. I'm like, okay, where am I going to sit? So I kind of sat right in the middle, right on the end. And then people started to come in, and Dean Ornish sat beside me to my right. Andy Weil sat in front of me, and Robert Saperko sat behind me. And I just was like one of the first people in there, and they came to me, right? And Dean
Wow.
and I spent probably, oh gosh, a couple days talking about our practices, what our work was like, and cholesterol and heart disease. And Andy gave a kind of a talk on integrative medicine and the education of integrative medicine. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I really need to do this program. And we talked a little bit about it after he had done giving the lecture. And I said, I think this is probably a good idea for me to do it. And My husband wasn't too happy about me doing more school, but I really, really thought it was the icing on the cake for me to do. I'd done all of this allopathic medicine training, but now all of a sudden I've got this opportunity to really formalize that other piece of education that I really was interested in. And January, that was October, that conference. January, I was in the program, and it started at the University of Arizona College of Medicine.
What year was this?
This was 2004, January 2004. I started the program.
And it had just been running a few years at that point, or?
This was I believe, the fourth program, the fourth class.
Yeah.
And I graduated on my birthday.
Now, in terms of your coming from an allopathic model, what were your first inklings of what we call holistic originally, as it morphed through complementary, alternative, and then integrative? How did you encounter that, and what were your feelings when you first did, and what led you into that path?
So I believe I'm just naturally guided towards something that's not pure allopathic. Of course, I love surgery, and I've done it for years. I did it when I was an RN, and I went and got a surgery certificate to be a first assist. So that was a very interesting part of it. But medicine, to me, didn't get anybody better. And I was dishing out a lot of medication, but people kept coming back and still having the same experience. And it's like, this is not working. And I remember thinking about, when I was a kid and I used to brush the room. And when you brush a room and you go around the carpet, you're kind of just getting a little bit done. But if you remove the carpet and really truly brush the room and get all of the dust out and then put the clean carpet back down, then you've fixed everything, right? You've really cleaned it all out. And I kind of kept going back to that thought of when I was a child cleaning a room and learning to take everything out, look at it, clean it up, and then put everything back. And I'm like, okay, we're not doing that. We're just putting a little Band-Aid on here and a Band-Aid on there, and it's not working. And after I discovered the whole story of the 13 different types of cholesterol and the genetic component, I'm like, I cannot dish out medication anymore, because medication just brings down the pot of cholesterol. It doesn't tell you what's in the pot. So it kind of all happened all of a sudden. And what really did actually make something truly better was changing this mechanism. What's pushing the liver to produce all of this abnormal cholesterol is very, very small, that penetrates the lining of the artery, activates the immune system, and causes heart disease to start to happen. I understood that. I knew that was not going to work with a pill. And so what does work? And I had to go in and figure it out. Okay, this genotype 3-3 doesn't like a low-fat diet. If I gave the person more long-term fuel and more fat in the diet, that will turn off the abnormal small particle trait that causes heart disease to happen quickly. And I had to do that research on my own. I had to really, truly understand it. And I had to experience it. And that's why I know today when a patient comes to me and they say, I've done this fad diet, XYZ, I said, it really doesn't work for that particular genotype that you have. This is truly what works. And if you can stay with me for 3 to 4 weeks and trial it yourself and truly see what your physical body can do, it will get it better. It will happen. You will see how incredibly effective this recommendation that I'm going to give you works. But I've always been like that. That's been me. I'm just like when I was a child, I really wanted to just experience it. I wanted to experience, what is that? You can tell me, but I want to experience it myself, because I can actually rely on it. If I know that this is what happens, then I can say for sure, this is what happens for you, this particular genotype. And the diet and the exercise and the botanical supplements. Yeah, the medication may help for a short period of time, but it won't fix the problem. What fixes the problem is changing this mechanism called the human body, growing it differently.
And for our viewers, Pam's referring to the APOE gene, the 2, 3, and 4, and there'll be a link with your book and all that, so they can read up on it in the narrative that got you to this video. So, and this, you first got introduced this with Saperco's work?
So I went looking. When Rick had the issue with the heart scan, I went looking. And man, did I find a pot of gold, which was so close to me. I was in Walnut Creek, Danville, and Saperco was in Burlingame. And wow, all of this research. And then got to know Dr. Saperco, and we became pretty darn good friends over the years. And I think we were supposed to meet. I think this was perfect timing, because he was actually beginning to write a book and then published a book. And I had started to write a book. Of course, mine took a little bit longer than his, but we were pretty much on the same path. And all of a sudden, boom, we met, right? And he was more on the research side and did some clinical, but I was more on the more practical. Here, this is what you got to do. This is what works. And it kind of turned out really well.
So now the clinic that you opened is the one where you are now in Black Hawk? Or
yes, it is.
And that morphed into, and you've adopted your, the Penscott name into your corporate title.
Right.
So let's see, there's a couple of things I was going to ask about. So you did the training with Andy a while, and that was 2004. So it's been like 15 years you've been at this.
Yes, I graduated in November of 2005. So
exactly 5 years. So
yeah.
Now I encountered you when you wanted an editor for your book.
Right.
About 12, 13 years ago. Wow.
Right.
It's been that long.
Right.
And I had to learn a lot of biochemistry over again because it wasn't my favorite subject.
Right.
And then somewhere along the line, you were involved with Wayne Dyer's work. And that's an interesting side story too that I'd like to hear, how you met him and what you did for him. And
right. So that was definitely an interesting experience. So Kim Evans is an integrative medicine nurse practitioner in Louisville, Kentucky.
Right. And, yes. Right near where my grandparents lived, I found out.
Right.
Looks out. Yeah.
Right. So Kim was actually using my work, the APOE gene program, and Wayne Dyer's work. And when she put them together, she noticed that she got a patient better, much quicker. Behavior changed, happened quickly. People were able to stay focused on what the plan of care was. And she contacted Wayne and said, I believe we need to meet because I use your work and I use Pam McDonald's work. We need to meet and collaborate and discuss maybe a research project or something that we can do, because it's so powerful what I'm seeing. So she called me and said, would you be interested in going to Maui and meeting with Wayne and I to talk about your work, his work, and what I do for patients, and how we see patients getting better quicker when behavior change happens, with his work and the right diet. So I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll go to Hawaii. It's a nice place to go. I'll go and meet with this man that I really didn't know. But so when I got there, we went looking for his house, and we actually couldn't find it. So Kim goes, we're going to find it. Let's just sit down here and let's wait, because some information needs to come to us. So we sat on the grass, and all of a sudden, Kim was looking one way and I was looking at the hotel, and the hotel and the condos were together. And all of a sudden, Wayne came walking down the path, recognized Kim, and he said, Kim, you're here. And so she started to talk to Wayne, and I had a view of his face. She was looking at him, but I could see his face right on. And I noticed something was wrong. The way he was almost fearful in his answers. I noticed his body language was a little off. And I said, hold on a second, something's wrong. What's the matter? And he said, well, and he became deflated. I got diagnosed with leukemia this morning. And I go, oh my goodness, this is why we're here. So it truly, I believe, was why we came, because what we did is we went to work on his problem, and he came back to California, and we got him tested, and we changed his diet. We did a whole series of testing. But at the same time, he went to a allopathic oncologist, and he had a very poor experience with this oncologist who wanted to just give him chemotherapy. Yeah. And he had done some research himself about diet and about green tea and supplements, and he totally was poo-pooed and said, Wayne, supplements and diet and green tea doesn't get leukemia better. And he said, then you're not the provider for me. So he wanted to truly trial an integrative medicine approach. And what ended up happening is he went from completely abnormal labs to almost completely normal labs. And it proved to him firsthand that truly, if he did change his diet, he did build his body differently, he did stop the junk food and all of the food that he was eating before, it would get him to a place that he'd never been, and his labs would change, truly change, and he would feel better. And that truly was a positive. When you can continue to make a change in your behavior because you feel better, that's more of an incentive to stay along that path than anything else. And again, this is about how can we get you to feel it, to see it, and to experience it, versus just accept somebody else's word for it. And that was something that he wanted me to help him do. Mm-hmm. And of course, I did not tell him I had written a book. It was actually his wife who he had asked if his wife could get tested and do the same program as he was doing. And she had gone on and did a little bit more research about me than Wayne did. And she bought my book on Amazon, read it. And when I was giving her results in California, she said, so what's Wayne think about your book? And I got a little bit like my heart skipped a beat, because I didn't know that anybody had known about the book. from this group. And she said, it's a great book. You need to tell Wayne about this book. And I said, well, I kind of didn't want to muddy the waters. She said, well, if you don't give it to him, I will. So I wrote him a letter, sent him a book, and said, I'm so sorry. I wanted to only focus on you getting better. I didn't want to make this about me or about my book. He got the book and he said, I'm mad because you didn't tell me about it. And then he sent it to Reed Tracy at Hay House and said, we have got to publish this. This is way too good to not publish with Hay House. And because I had self-published it by myself, they said, yes, let's go ahead and get it published. And then I toured with him for two and a half years and got the message out with Hay House. And of course, the story is history.
Yeah, now that would have been when we were doing the second edition.
Correct.
We were talking with him. And
Right.
I had to go back and learn all that biochemistry again.
Right.
You don't know what I had to go through, Pam.
I know, you did a great job.
Well, so then you sold like 20,000 copies in a month or something with him promoting it. I remember
more than that, way more than that. We sold a ton of copies and still are selling a lot of copies of it. But you know, the APOE gene has not changed, and I think that's the really good thing, right? When you've got genetics, we just are able to kind of continue to do the research. And for me, because I believe I did a lot of the work up front and was very anal about getting it right, what research is finding now is what I was seeing back in 2003, 2004. So there, you know, medicine moves like molasses, as we know, and now people are just beginning to really see the fruits of what nutrition and diet can really do for somebody's health, whether it's Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease or diabetes or heart disease. There's an actual protocol for it, and it works. And I've got years of experience with this, so it's kind of like second nature to me now.
No, I'm not tuned into the normal channels of medical news, so but it has gotten a lot more mainstream then. And in what sense? Articles in journals or?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot more research come out on APOE. I think because we now have an epidemic of Alzheimer's disease, and now seeing a lot more people have Parkinson's disease, I think people are asking more questions, right? You know, can nutrition, exercise, managing fluid, managing food, managing air, managing temperature, and managing space, the 5 elements of the physical body, can you see a reduction in inflammation all over the body when you manage it based on your APOE gene? And I can absolutely tell you without a doubt that yes, you can. I've taken a severe Alzheimer's patient who doesn't know anything, doesn't know where she is, doesn't know what's happening to her, can't sleep, super anxious, figured out that she's a diabetic, she's B12 deficient, she's not eating the right foods for APOE gene, giving the right diet, beginning exercise, taking the correct supplements, and the patient is now sitting in my office, cognitive, knows what year it is, knows where she is quiet, is not anxious, is sleeping. Now, what is that? That's taking a genetic map, a blueprint, and saying this is what it needs, and beginning to change how this body is built. This incredible human mechanism can heal immediately when it's given the right chemistry. And I think we need to put more emphasis on that, because this is the most sophisticated machine on the planet. Yeah. Every other machine has come from this one.
Well put.
Yes.
obvious, but you don't, it's right under our nose. Now, we also have Dale Bredesen with his work, and Ornish has picked up on it. So yeah, you're really a pioneer of getting this out there. And
I can tell you though, I think the track of putting people on extremely high fat diets is not good. I can tell you I'm seeing a lot more cancer with people who are ApoE4 coming to my practice who've been on these horrific high fat diets that are getting cancer. I'll give you an example. And we actually need to bring in a couple of other genetic expressions also, and in particularly the MTHFR marker, which is the gene that transports and clears protein. So protein in the form of food is protein. So I had a patient who saw his primary care, and this is a really important example, saw his primary care in Walnut Creek, got a full physical. His doctor said, you know, you have very high cholesterol and you're pre-diabetic, you have a glucose level that's pretty high. And I don't know if you have heart disease or not, but I think you may have heart disease. You need to go get a heart scan. So he went to heart scan. They did a heart scan on him. He actually had just a tiny bit of heart disease, but heart scan is a business, right? They talked him into a full body scan. So he had this full body scan and he had nothing else wrong with him. He was very concerned about this high glucose issue. So he went to a buddy of his who said, you know, if you go to this doctor in Pleasanton, they'll put you on a diet where your glucose will go away. And it's a very high fat diet. So he went on this ketogenic diet for 16 months, where he ate the bacon and the cheese and the fish and the salmon and the cottage cheese and the coffee, and all of that diet that is the ketogenic diet for 16 months until he got a belly pain. When he got the belly pain, he felt horrible. Went back to his primary care in Walnut Creek, who within an hour got a CT scan. And he had pancreatic cancer and liver cancer in 16 months. So his daughter, who was a patient of mine, who had had breast cancer, who was now much better, was in remission, said, you got to see Pam McDonald. You got to find out what has driven this to have a cancer within 16 months in 2 major organs. So we tested his MTHFR and his ApoE. He was a double abnormal MTHFR and he was an ApoE4/4.
wow.
Right. So putting somebody on who is a 4/4 on a high fat inflammatory diet is going to lead them to be briefly inflamed, chronically inflamed. The cells start to change to become aplastic, precancer, and cancer. Then the cells started to split, looking for a new environment. And then you had a metastatic disease. And this guy died. I mean, I worked with him. He came in jaundice and very, very thin. And I put him on the ApoE4 anti-inflammatory diet. His jaundice actually went away. He actually did start to gain weight, but he had cancer in both the liver and the pancreas. So it was too late. But all of a sudden, I had this wave of ApoE4s flooding into my practice, all with precancer states or cancer states. People who had leukemia, people had cancer of the colon, people had pancreatic cancer, people had liver cancer. It was like unreal for me to see this happening. This is, of course, a few years ago, but now we've got this ketogenic diet that's like on steroids, and people are telling patients, yeah, it's okay. You got cancer, go on the ketogenic diet. You got Alzheimer's disease, go on the ketogenic diet. I'm starting to see some of the Bredesen patients come to me now because they're saying it's not working. And we want to try the ApoE gene diet. I have colleagues who've been through the training of Bredesen, and they're saying, you know what? Bredesen doesn't seem to be working for my patients, but the APOE gene diet seems to be working. So
Is
I think
Bredesen
we have to look at the individual genetic expressions for each patient, not just a blanket diet.
I wasn't aware that Bredesen was promoting a ketogenic diet.
Yes, but I do believe that there is an actual disclaimer that says that APOE gene 4s, it may not work for and have caution for. So I think even that camp understands that it's very, very individual, and we have to be very careful when we're making these recommendations. But Bredesen and I are in this world. We know about this. We've had experience about this. Both of us have. And we are probably a lot more cautious than the average doctor, say from Texas or from New York, who are just saying, okay, they're not really experiencing truly what this means to make a recommendation for a patient. Or they're just saying, eat a ketogenic diet and maybe it'll get rid of your diabetes. But what else is it doing? So I think there's caution there for patients and also for providers.
Mm-hmm. Well, after working with you, I edited a book for a pamphlet actually for a colleague up in Ashland, Oregon, who was keto adapting people for 2 to 3 months. And one of my dear friends was in that program and told me about it. And I resisted doing it myself because I wanted to do it with Yvonne, and she didn't have a gallbladder and so on and so forth. But eventually, about 2 or 3 years later, I did do it for 2 months. And it radically, my little pot belly disappeared. I hate cooking, so it was a struggle for me to, I was alone here in Australia with Yvonne. Yvonne was still in California. But after doing that for 2.5 months, the main idea was to get your kidneys used to it. Then his program, you don't stay on a ketogenic diet. And similarly, Joe Mercola says, no, it's not a long-term thing at all. You just do it periodically. And what I do now is fast for 36 hours once a week, check my ketone levels, I can bring them up, and then I pretty much eat a normal diet. And then I started hearing about Valter-Longo and the intermittent, well, I guess Bredesen does the intermittent fasting too. And that flies in the face of your eating 5 or 6 meals a day. So I'm curious. And I've noticed that I don't get hungry anymore. And it seems to me it's the pendulum swinging from our extreme high carbohydrate diet, from the junk food, and how poorly people they've lost their ability to make ketones and burn them, which I retrained myself in a couple of months to do it. But then going on a full-time ketogenic diet is like the pendulum going the other direction. So I'm not surprised that you're seeing this problem. It seems to me that if we have the ability to burn both glucose and ketones, and that's Mercola's whole thing too. But I'm curious with particularly the fasting element, how that fits with your thinking.
So, when I see a patient and I test their genetics, I'm testing their glucose, their inflammatory markers. I'm looking at insulin levels. I'm looking at hemoglobin A1C. And I can tell you, people who go on this fasting, and especially if it's going for 16 hours, internal feeding happens. Uric acid levels are higher, insulin levels are higher, glucose levels are higher. So what's happening? Gluconeogenesis is happening. And, if you're looking at the activity of the muscle mass, are the mitochondria for the aerobic pathway and the anaerobic pathway disappearing? So the engine becomes very weak to clear the glucose? I think we have to take all of it into consideration. And I think some of my biochemistry training happened with Covert Bailey, and his theories of internal feeding and external feeding were pretty strong for me. And I've followed that up with clinical testing. So somebody comes in, like I have a young lady from Australia right now. She came back from Australia and she's been doing this intermittent fasting for 16 hours. And she kind of says, oh, you know, I really have not lost a whole lot of weight. Well, she has a normal ApoE gene and she's got high glucose and she can't lose weight. And when I look at her patterns of eating, she doesn't eat a protein, a fat, and a carbohydrate, and she doesn't start to eat until like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Yet she's getting up early and she's doing activities of daily living and she's using fuel. So is she internally feeding and bringing her muscle mass activity down so she can't even burn her own fuel, her own stored fat? Potentially she is. Now, we've been working since she's gotten back, and I said, you know, stop the intermittent fasting, stop this 16-hour fasting. Let's give you, okay, stop eating at 7, 8 o'clock at night, and then maybe eat breakfast at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. That's giving you a good 12 hours if you want to do that. But then when you start to move, then give your body some fuel. Let's not break down muscle mass and the activity of muscle mass. Let's exercise after you've eaten in the evening. Let's build the activity of the muscle so it becomes like, you know, a Porsche instead of a Mini, and let's pull in the fat stores and let's lose some weight. And it's been working. And I do this for a lot of patients. So I've done this for years. So I know that this works. So I think we have to look at what's the benefit of fasting. I think definitely there's evidence that if you eat, you know, all the way through till you go to bed and you wake up very early in the morning and you eat for like 18, 20 hours a day. I don't think you're supposed to do that. But I also don't think you're supposed to fast for 16 hours. If you're not externally feeding, the brain needs to get fuel and the body needs to get fuel. And I think you need to have fuel on board. If Michael Phelps was not eating 12,000 calories when he was competing, he wouldn't be winning medals, because I don't think his mitochondria in the aerobic and anaerobic pathway would be as powerful as if he was, you know, eating the 12,000 calories. I mean, he eats 12,000 calories and doesn't gain weight for a reason, because he has to feed those enzymes within his muscle that makes him as successful as he has been with his swimming. So
it seems to me that the real issue is you don't want to be burning muscle, but you do want to be burning fat. But if we've grown up eating a high carbohydrate diet and we've lost the ability to burn fat, and that's what Rod's program that I got into and edited his booklet about, was to retrain yourself to burn fat instead of muscle. Now, whether you can do that with intermittent fasting, that's what Mercola is suggesting. But what I did was pretty extreme for 2 months. And then I was done. I was able to produce ketones quickly and not burn muscle. So that's the gray area for me, is how to get there, because we've lost that ability, and people that don't have the ability have got to continually feed. But we didn't evolve that way. We evolved feast or famine. You know, we didn't have 3 squares a day for 99.9% of our time on this planet. But we've lost that ability because of our constant feeding, and particularly what we're feeding with, the junk food and the high carbs.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, definitely our industrial diet has played havoc. I think the other thing that really needs to be paid attention to is the genetic traits for heart disease get turned on when people go on these diets. And I have not figured out how a ketogenic diet can turn it off. It turns it on. I mean, I've had patients who've been completely stable, full on pattern A. The particles of cholesterol are big, and they go on a ketogenic diet, they become extremely small. So we know when they're small, they penetrate the lining of the artery and cause oxidation and inflammation to happen. But there's another genetic trait called the LP(a), the lipoprotein A with the kringle attached, which gets really turned on when people go through these fad diets, these really low carbohydrate diets. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at and really needs to be researched.
And LP(a) is genetic, right? I mean, it's
Genetic, yeah.
hereditary.
About a third of the population carries an LP(a),
I've
and if
got,
you turn it on high, especially for men, it can be really atherogenic and artery damaging in the carotid arteries of the neck and also in the LAD of the heart. And we
right.
see huge amounts of plaque happen in those areas.
Well, I've got the the little a, but my Agatston score was 50, and so was Yvonne. So it was a great relief. And there's a great video I just saw about the man in Texas who fought to get insurance to cover, and I didn't know it did cover the coronary calcium scores, but it took him like 10 years of fighting the insurance companies and urging people to know what they've got. And
Right, right.
I stumbled on it. It was Len Saputo happened to tell me about it because I had an abnormal EKG on a stress test. And he said, well, why don't you get a coronary? What's that? So I did. It's
Right.
a great relief. Well, I hadn't intended to get so technical for our viewers, but I'm enjoying the intellectual catching up here because it's been years since we've talked. But let's get back to your life just to wrap up here because my voice is starting to wear out and we'll get so long that we'll lose some viewers. But you've been running this clinic successfully. You have a staff of how many? And
about 12.
Wow, yeah. And now you were making a documentary that I got interviewed for. What happened with that? Did they ever
Actually
get
just got launched.
Really?
Yes, really, just recently. So that's now, I think it's available on YouTube. Scott, the film producer, just launched it a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
And
Did I make the cut?
you did, absolutely, you did. Yes, you're in quite a bit of it. Yeah, I'll send you the link so you can look at it.
Okay.
So there's a professional link and then there's the public link, so you can see the professional one. But I also have an online program, and the film is in the online program also.
I wanted to get into that next because you worked long and hard, and I know Maren did a lot of work on that too. I have yet to see it. I'm dying to get in and see it.
Right.
That's your baby to make you reach the world for people that can't come to Blackhawk.
Right, and a lot of people from Australia actually are utilizing it. I'm very excited. People from all over the world: Canada, Holland, France, Italy, England. I mean, we've got a lot of people all over the world that are doing the APOE gene program, and it's exciting because the technology is where you can do a cheek swab in your own home, and then you can send it to the lab, and then you can get your results with me over Zoom like this. And then you can do the program for a year and really delve into all of the great information that is in each of the weeks. And it's great feedback from people, really, really good feedback. They love it. They say it's very rich.
And I hope you're not working 80 hours a week still.
No, not quite. Although we did just begin to write a maternity program. So we've got the original program, and then we're going to do one for moms who are expecting babies. So that's probably the one that I will really enjoy doing. So we'll give moms a little bit more information of how to prepare for pregnancy, and then what to do each week while you're pregnant, and then of course breastfeeding, and then bringing up your new baby, right?
And so much of this bad biochemistry is the lack of breastfeeding and the early conditions. I mean, that's why I left adult wellness to go into infant wellness, was seeing how important the prenatal period is, and
Right.
what you're exposed to. And it was um, what's his name, the French doctor, water birth guy. I'm thinking, I'll think of his name in a minute, but he was saying that the findings or the experience you have prenatally are far more important than anything we can do after birth through adulthood. Michel Adam, who I'm talking about, he has this massive database, and it's the American peds, what they went from 6 months to recommending a year of breastfeeding. That was about 10 years ago, and World Health Organization's been saying 2+ years forever. But how many babies get that? A tiny, tiny fraction. And the single most important things we can do to babies, I'm going to do a pitch here, is carry your baby, sleep with them, and give them breast milk, and that connection. Because the currency of wellness is connection. I'm going to say that to my dying day.
And I think we've probably seen a little bit of a negative outcome over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years for patients who have not breastfed. So you think about what's happened to the dairy industry and all the hormones that have been injected to the cows, right? And where does some of the baby's food come from? In formula, right? So if you've got a child who has an APOE4 gene, right? This is why I believe that APOE should be tested in the nursery, so mom can see she has an APOE herself, and her baby has an APOE. Maybe a baby has an APOE4/4 or an APOE4/2. That child is much more susceptible to neurological damage if it's fed formula that has had Posilac injected into it. It's like jet fuel for a baby's neurological system. A human with human IGF-1 levels versus a 2,000-pound cow with an IGF-1 hormone of a 2,000-pound cow, what does that do to a baby? Does it make brain cells split quicker from a 2,000-pound cow with Posilac injected into it?
What's Posilac?
Posilac is a hormone that increases insulin-like growth factor 1. It increases a cow to produce more milk. It eats more feed and it produces more milk. It's a hormone that it's a synthetic hormone that was produced, and about 1 in 6 cows get it today. Now, if you're feeding an infant, it's a brand new baby, formula, and that baby is an APOE4, is that a risk factor for a neurological issue with that baby?
Yeah.
That child who I wrote about, who had autism, and the mom went on a completely different diet for 3 weeks, and then the baby came to me and we tested the baby, and the baby had an APOE4/3, and then the child got better from autism. I think that's one example. I think we need to do a heck of a lot more research on this, but I think we start with a question, right? We start with a question: does an APOE4 baby that does not breastfeed or takes formula from a cow have a greater risk of abnormal disease process starting in infancy and having a learning disorder or an autistic issue? Or, if you look at PKU, we test PKU in every baby in every state, and it's law in 50 states. Why do we do that? Because if a child has an abnormal PKU level or expression, it's going to get mental retardation. We prevent that by changing the diet if there's a PKU abnormality. It's the same with APOE. And I think people need to wake up to this. I see it. My colleagues see it. I think pediatricians see it. What is this body made of? Water, food, air, temperature, and space. That's it, nothing else. The diet is 84%. If you add the space, it's 90% of you. And I think we've got to make that connection. Diet is so important to your own genetic blueprint.
I think I'd throw love in there to the ingredients as well, the
It makes it
non-physical.
sweeter. The love makes it sweeter.
And then you throw in vaccines of unknown, with unknown poisons in them and an unformed immune system. And I'm just getting curious about whether, even though the FDA or the CDC denies it, the high rate of autism from vaccines, whether there's an APOE correlation with that. That'd be fascinating to see.
I am not sure. I don't know that. But just think
no,
about,
because it's not tested.
it's not tested. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the benefit of testing babies like a PKU at birth, testing an APOE at birth would be beneficial to make some good decisions.
And PKU is like a tiny, tiny fraction compared to the APOE4s that are running around.
Yeah, we have a third of the population that carries an APOE4.
Yeah,
a big chunk of the population, right? So PKU abnormality is 1 in 15,000. APOE abnormality could be huge.
Yeah.
So I think the whole, vaccination question, if you look back at when we were getting our vaccinations, we got very few. The burden on the immune system is huge today, and we give a lot of them. Could the schedule be changed for vaccinations? I think it potentially could. I think we've got to become aware of that. We've got to gather more information about that. Moms and dads are educating themselves, but I don't know that medicine has gotten to a place of where educating and actually clinically giving the best answer. Avoidance is always an answer either.
There's 140 more vaccines in the pipeline, so you can imagine what the schedule is going to be like for the next generation. It's frightening what they're headed towards. And how does this relate to the epidemic of Alzheimer's? What's going on with our immune system? All of the autoimmune diseases, the peanut allergies that my granddaughter has, and it's frightening. I'm getting off onto my pet project for the last 7 months.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's wrap up with your personal life. So you've got this wonderful program, you've got the clinic, you've got the online program, and you're having a life that I can actually talk to you on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
What are your visions for the future? What's next in the pipeline for you?
So what's next for me is to create this program for moms and babies. And I think that's an exciting part, because I did a lot of work in labor and delivery for 9 years, and the operating room and infertility. So it's definitely a love of mine, and I became a women's health nurse practitioner first, and then I went into adult primary care, and of course then I went into pediatrics. So I've got a lot of information and education from birth to death, right, to the 96-year-old, and the span in between. So it's going to be exciting for me to create this next program, and to see how people respond to it. And what's the outcome? Are we going to have moms who have a better pregnancy, a better outcome for the baby? If you grow the body differently while you're in that preconceptual state, and then you get pregnant, and then you have this incredible anti-inflammatory diet for your APOE gene when you're pregnant, do you have a healthier baby? And you absolutely have an emphasis on education with breastfeeding, which is nature, and then continuing that anti-inflammatory diet for the baby. I think it's going to be exciting to see.
Yes, well, I'm getting turned on, because that's one of my loves, is infant wellness, and wow, so crucial. Yeah. Well, any other parting thoughts or wisdom for our viewers and as we wrap up?
I think we have to pay attention to ourselves. I think we have to manage this body differently. I think we have to become much more conscious because it really does matter. And I think we've got to say, all right, the diets and the information out there may be okay for the general population, but what's right for me?
Hmm. The one size fits all fallacy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Those are great words to end on.
Yeah.
I'm going
Thanks
to
for having me.
end the recording. So this has been great.